Happiness. My name is Allan Friesen, and with me is my friend and colleague and co-host, Scott Sweetman. How you doing tonight there, Brother Scott?
I'm doing great. We had a little technological lag, but you fixed it, my friend. You've troubleshot your own situation, and we're here.
I prayed to the tech gods, and they have listened. So hallelujah. Here we are. All right.
When I was in Japan, there was actually temples where you could take your computer and get your computer blessed.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, cars is a big one. Almost all cars get blessed in Japan, and the temple near where we lived, like 2 blocks away, we were up on the 16th, 17th floor. We could look down and see it, and it had this huge yard, like dirt space out front, and we thought maybe they do exercises or something there. And no, it was so once a month they would have a car blessing, and the cars would all pull in and the monks would bless the cars.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Pretty cool, eh? That's spirituality.
That is. Wow. Whew. All right.
How about you? Did you have a good day?
I did have a good day. It was very busy, but it was a really good day. And I just actually left Galbraith School. We were informing the parents and the kids about Camp Carmangay and looking for participants who want to come out and ride horses and go kayaking and be by the fire and sing songs and live in a tent for a few days.
Wow.
Yeah, so very fun.
And that's through our friend, Brian
Imogene. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's a beautiful place. So I'm hoping it's going to be packed this summer. So, yes.
Yeah, it's a great program, and I think what makes it unique is that he really believes in that bi-directional healing. He doesn't just see it as, well, it ties in with what we're talking about tonight, the idea that in the act of, teaching and mentoring, there's a healing that goes both ways, and when the kids are with the animals get healed. And
yes, very much so. And remind me again, what are we talking about tonight?
We're talking about intergenerational wisdom and bridging the gap with storytelling.
Oh, man, how powerful is storytelling, eh? Wow.
It's crazy. And one of the things that sort of drove this is, storytelling is an integral part of, well, all civilizations, less so maybe in modern times, but traditional societies and cultures rely on storytelling, oral storytelling, as their main form of transmission for cultural and heritage. Mm-hmm. And we're blessed here in southern Alberta on the ancestral land, Treaty 7, to have fantastic communities where oral tradition is still important and part of their transmission of culture and history and awareness.
Definitely so. Yes, very true. Very true.
Yeah. Have you had any situation in your life where, either as a young person or as an adult, where storytelling was used to sort of connect and maybe help bridge that gap?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a religious household, so of course, stories from the Bible or stories about things in the Bible that were more framed for children certainly were ones to teach lessons that hopefully you could learn that way instead of learning the hard way. So, yeah.
Well, and you not too long ago, last year before, I'm changing glasses because I'm having problems with that cataract, is you redid a truck, which unfortunately burnt down, with a young fellow. And I bet there was some storytelling going on there about when you were young and vehicles and what importance they had.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I mean, that was the young man. I started off my relationship with him with Big Brothers, Big Sisters. What a great program. And so a lot of that was just about, okay, that's one way to do it. You might want to try this. And here's why. Here's how I learned it, right? So now I think I have taught him not to burn up vehicles after I burned up 2. It goes better than I did about how to do that. So that's good news. So, yeah.
But that experience, that not to do things, I know, I don't know why, one of our neighbors here, I mean, I live in suburban Lethbridge, One of our neighbors, I was driving by, and he was out roping the transformer box. And although I grew up on a working ranch, and one of the things that we learned was how to rope cattle when we would,
he was lassoing the transformer box.
Yeah, he was out in his driveway, and he was doing pretty good. Like, somebody had obviously, and he had a proper lariat. They're quite stiff. They're not,
right.
The ones they do tricks with and stuff are quite soft, because they need to be able to do stuff with them. But lariats start out as really, really stiff, and then through use they get softer. But he was doing pretty good, and it reminded me when I started. So when you throw, and it's a wrist action, it's kind of like, it's funny how your body remembers that action, right? And then when you throw, you let go, and then you dally, you grab the rope, and there's a propensity to do this. And if you wrap thumbs down...
Wait a minute. When you say do this, I couldn't quite see your hand. Show what you're doing.
So there's a saddle horn here, and you let go of your rope, and it's running through your hand as it goes out to catch the calf or cow.
Right.
And then once it's around their neck or their leg, you pull tight and you wrap it around the horn of your saddle, so that when the animal, the saddle, which has padding and support and an extra back strap so the horse doesn't get hurt, the much larger horse and your weight take the pull from the animal.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful, and because you throw like this, when you let go, if you get excited and you wrap this way, I don't know if you can see me around the horn, when the rope goes taut at power, like there's a 150-pound calf at the end, it just pops your thumb off. It just goes, whoop, and that's it. You have no thumb. And, that's a story that a lot of older ropers always tell, younger people, thumbs up, whatever happens, thumbs up. And there's always some great stories about, how they meet an old cowboy with no thumbs, and how you could tell that they were, long time cow hand and things. And I used to love those stories as I was a kid, because Dale, oh my goodness, what was Dale's name? This is 40 years ago. He was a champion roper and one of our hands, and he had all these great stories about working cattle on the range and ghost stories. Man, we used to make him chase us around and tell us ghost stories and stuff. He was a great guy, but he was much older than we were, my brother and I, but because of his stories, some of them were cautionary tales, like don't burn your truck down, don't dally with your thumb down. But some of them were just to build that connection, right? He kind of looked scary when you first saw him, like, he was a gruff old cowboy, and he spoke kind of funny, and he chewed and spit a lot, and but the stories created that bridge. Pretty impressive stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah, great.
So what I thought we could talk about tonight is how stories are being brought back. When I went looking, there was a bunch of articles from this year and late last year on programs that government, NGOs, communities are using, not just to bridge the gap, but to improve mental health.
Okay, sure. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So,
and make more memorable lessons as well, right? Make something that you could relate to, like your story about not dallying with your thumbs down. Okay, I've never heard this before because I'm not a cowboy, but I will remember that forever, right? And and when I see some old cowboy with no thumb, I'll say, "Oh, tell me about that."
Yeah, well, I saw one come off. Ooh. One, maybe two, in front of me. So usually you go in teams of two, right? Yeah. Because often you want to get a front and a back leg, because you don't want to cause a lot of stress. And usually, I know anti-cattle people are freaking out, but if you get a nice rope on the front and on the back, the calf will usually stop fighting, because there's not, you don't want a calf strung up by one leg throwing against it hard and getting hurt.
Right.
Because the goal is to help them, not hurt them. You want to give them medicine usually, or there's some reason that you're pulling them out of the hurt. And so you would travel in two usually, and being younger and a greenhorn, I was usually the backup person. And the first time I remember, like, whoop, whoop, and you could hear it. And he started to cuss because it was too late. And his thumb, because you can see it, it was like a cartoon. Throat went, poof, and his thumb went, whew. And all the old cowhands were off their horses, just like this. Somebody grabbed it, and this is where stories get funny. Did he put it in his mouth, or did he put it in his spit cup? Anywhere, somewhere wet, and jumped in the pickup, grabbed this guy that was squirting blood everywhere, took off to the local Bentley hospital, one of the Lougheed hospitals of that time. And he came back that night with his thumb reattached, and a month later it had a good scar and didn't work quite as well as it did before, but
it was functional again. A little bit limited, but still functional. Wow.
Yeah. And of course the old timers were like, well, I guess you never do that again. And they're like, yeah, except there's lots of cowpokes with no thumbs at all. So yeah.
That really weirded me out when you said the guy picked up the thumb and put it in his mouth. That would be
yeah. Oh, I've seen that done before. Yeah, more than once actually.
Really?
And I don't think, it's because you're in cow poop and horse poop, and the inside of your mouth is not clean, but it's certainly cleaner than where it came from off the ground. So
that's true.
Yeah, and I mean those guys put a whole new angle on tough, right?
So there's like storytelling as a way to be a transmission of knowledge and ethics, and those kind of things has been like forever in every culture around the world, right? I mean, I don't think there's any exception to that, right? So
one of the things I found that was interesting is that the Western tradition, Greco-Roman tradition, sort of became like teacher and student, right? Like one person would be the orator, and there would be many gathered who would be the receivers of the wisdom and knowledge. But when I was researching this, I ran into indigenous communities where that dynamic was not the same. And I've never seen it. Maybe you have. I know you have been, with your indigenous friends and at a lot of activities, but where the story is ongoing and everyone is the storyteller. Everyone there is part of the story. And so people are encouraged to just pick up the story and tell a part of the story. And when they, stop, then somebody else picks up the story and tells another part of it. And apparently, ethnographically, this is to help people learn very long and complex stories by, memorizing it in parts and practicing parts. And then, have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so, but I can understand what you're saying. I mean, and I guess what I relate it to is, I had read about a book. It's kind of like, I guess it's the Blackfoot Bible, if you will. The Sun Came Down is what it's called.
All right.
Yeah. And in that, so there are so different many stories about Nape, and then about, I can't remember his name, Bloodspot or something like that, about their, the experiences they have had. And it would be very difficult to remember all of those, right? So I could certainly see, on, winter, you're sitting around the fire, there's nothing else to do, and you're telling a story, and then somebody tells one part of it and somebody tells another, that this is what Napi did in this situation, and, that it would continue on that way, right? That, one person, that it would be a shared experience of remembering and relaying what that story was about, kind of a thing, right? Or the next part of it. And then this happened. And then there was the, in Okotoks where Napi put his put his coat and gave it, and then the weather turned and he took it back, and then the rock monster thing followed him and chased him, and then the bird saved him, and that kind of a thing, right? So yeah.
There's storytelling groups where you can join. I know a cousin of ours started out in a clowning group where people who want to be clowns or are professional clowns get together. Yeah. And part of their training was storytelling to groups. In their clown persona, each of the participants had an alter ego that was their clown, and these clowns have different qualities. But storytelling was an important part of what they learned as clowns. A clown is not just to entertain, but it's to like lift the mood or help people through difficult times or those situations. Some of the things that storytelling have been used for are really interesting. Not just transmission, but cultural preservation. Societies will often have an official storyteller or an official storyteller family that's hereditary. Right. Treated like semi-deities or rulers in that way, which is very interesting. Yeah. Mutual learning, and that's where I got the information about the different way of storytelling. That storytelling in the West is sort of one directional, Greco-Roman traditional, right? Like the teacher doesn't really learn, the teacher lectures, right? Right. That's where we get lectern and all those things. But the mutual learning where the elders benefit from a renewed sense of purpose. And there's some really great programs that I was reading about. One called the Passion Project. And that's where they took students and paired them with seniors in a lodge, and they took turns telling each other stories. The seniors would tell stories to their youth partner, and then their youth partner would tell stories to the senior.
Cool. Yeah. I was familiar with this is in Southern Alberta as well, a similar sort of a thing, but it was more the direction from the senior to the student, right? And for the student, it was an opportunity to learn. I mean, we've all, a senior over their years have learned, how many experiences, like thousands and thousands and thousands of experiences. And then when you're, 15 years old, you've had 500 experiences, right? So, that I'm making those numbers up. Of course, there's no.
Yeah, we're not going to fact check those later.
Don't fact check.
Take our word at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Cool.
Well, there's in our area. And I found it really interesting. One of our colleagues is doing her PhD, and she's part of the Center for Indigenous Arts Research and Technology, a building space for Indigenous sovereignty and survivance, right here at the U of L. And it's a worldwide organization. They have pods. They're called pods, and part of that, there's elders associated with each pod, and part of their responsibility is to share stories and cultural insight and language of their culture with young people or outsiders to help transmit that culture in a traditional way and add the power of technology and modern communication and research to it. University of Calgary has something, they built a storytelling classroom where teachers can bring K to 12 students, where they put them together with Indigenous storytellers. And it's called Books to Build On, Indigenous Literatures for Learning. They have 250 resources from the Treaty 7 lands, or the people encompassed by that. And it's been very successful, focusing on cultural literacy here in Southern Alberta. Right. Great program, right?
No kidding. Yeah,
have you heard of that one?
I haven't. No. That's great.
I was surprised. Another great one. It's called Voices from Treaty 7. And it explicitly focuses on traditional stories directly from Indigenous storytellers. And that's important, of course, because there's nuances, and you speak some Blackfoot. Michelle's studying it now, and I know when I studied Latin and Greek, it was important to read a text in the original language, not via interpretation. Right. And I think that trying to understand, something as culturally diverse and powerful as the peoples of Treaty 7 or the lands of Treaty 7, I think having and encouraging Indigenous storytellers is a great opportunity. What do you think?
Well, I have to interject with you know who Tara Brock is, right? Yeah. So she's basically a Buddhist meditation teacher, a really smart woman. And she tells this story about this young monk who enters the monastery, and he notes that all of the copies, like there's no photocopiers or anything, right?
Right.
All the copies are being made from a copy. And so he says to the head abbot guy, he says, well, is this such a good idea to copy from copies? What if there was a mistake? And then, that error would just be, continue on and on kind of a thing, right? And so the abbot thinks about it and says, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. I should check this out. So he goes down into the deep, dark recesses where the original manuscripts are, right? And he's there for like hours and hours. And the young monk, he gets a little concerned and he goes back down there, and the senior guy is just thrashing in anguish and beating his head against the wall and like so upset. And the young monk says, what, Father? What have you found? He says, the word was celebrate. Celebrate.
Yeah, I can see that would cause some stress. But in the historical vein, and it's been written about it fictionally, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Have you ever read any of his stuff? Very interesting. Anyway, in the medieval time, before the printing press, they would have young scribes copy the religious manuscripts by hand.
Sure.
And they were beautifully illustrated, right? But there was a lot of dissension in the church, and some of these young artists would sneak in little commentaries, visual commentaries, or off-color jokes or humors in the illustration. So if you look at them, there'll be what looks like the Pope, but then you'll notice at the very subtly drawn in a little tail, like a monkey's tail under his robes, or some rather graphic body parts that have been snuck into bigger pictures. And that was a case where the copying was an entertainment for these young monks that, as you say, they were abstinent, and they were locked up in these monasteries, and not all of them agreed. A lot of them were Greek slaves, for example, that were brought in, and they wanted to add a little bit to the story of their own feelings. Not as fun as your joke. That's a good one. I'll remember that one. So another one that I thought was really interesting. Have you ever heard of Okosi? Okay, nope. Messiah. It's a theater production in Calgary. And I think it's still ongoing, but it's put on by members of Treaty 7. And it's a theater production that has storytelling, dancing, singing, elements of the powwow. And it reflects on intergenerational trauma and of colonization. And it's part of the desire for reconciliation, and the belief that young people maybe don't understand what it was really like for those people. But through, storytelling and through sharing of songs, that the hope is that younger Aboriginal people in the community will get a better understanding in context, and that people from outside the community will develop not only an understanding, but see commonality and sympathy and move closer to reconciliation.
Beautiful. I haven't heard of that one specifically, but I was at a Rotary event, and there was a group of young Indigenous people that had a similar sort of a one where they had like a play with dance and with a lot of imagery with it, with the same purpose to kind of express, as an example, when kids were pulled out of their homes and put in residential schools and what that was like, and that kind of a thing. And it was very dramatic and very well done. Yeah, it was extremely powerful. Yeah.
I just, when you look at it, and I know that social media is really popular and you get a dopamine hit, but the story quality is very low. I mean, how much story can you get in 30 seconds? How much flavor and character? But interestingly, and I know that you've watched one or two, is that in the last 5 years, 8 years, Korean dramas have become very popular. And they're traditionally extremely long, like very long episode numbers. And like 16 or 17. Usually the episodes would be almost an hour long each. Yeah. And heavy focus on character development, right? Like, so, on a lot of North American shows, especially the 30-minute ones, which after you take the commercials out are like 18 minutes, there'll be 3 storylines. Like the detectives will arrest a drug dealer, and one of the cops will fall in love, and, the mayor will get a hate letter or something threatening their lives. And one of the appeals, and Korean dramas have now become a worldwide phenomenon, is that they adhered to a much more traditional style of storytelling, where it wasn't rushed, and the process was the important part, right? Right.
And art
form recently they've been bought out because of their. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said an art form where, like, it's not just to get it done. It's to fully express the characters and the emotions and yeah, beautiful.
And what happened at first is, of course, Netflix and the big corporations went in and said, "Oh, we want to buy that. Make season 2." And the writers were like, "There is no season 2. Everything that the story started and the story finished, right? That's the story." And there was this cultural banging of heads, like, well, you can't do that. The first one was seen by millions. The second season is going to be a huge hit. We'll make a ton of money. Just write another season. And the authors were like, "Yeah, but the story's done." Like, there was this whole confusion over they couldn't just write the story to add more. Like, they had a story and they told it. Yeah. And so what happened is a lot of studios just took over control, and it's become sort of a backlash now. They shortened down the number of episodes. They shortened the time of the episodes. They have introduced more fragmented plot lining. And now you start to see season 2 and season 3 to cash in on this trend, which of course is taking it away from what made it popular as a story.
Yeah, sure. No, makes sense.
Do you watch a lot of movies, a lot of fiction?
You know what? I do not. As you know, I was recently on some very long plane rides. I've watched
very long.
Yes. I watched more movies there and back from India than I've watched in the last, 5 years. I watched a bunch of them. If I can just share one real quick. There was one. Did I tell you this about 104 Not Out? Did I tell you this story?
A little bit, but I'd like to hear more. It fits right in with what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. What a beautiful story. There's this gentleman, he's 104 years old, and he's, vibrant and alive and connects with people. And just like, he'll see somebody on the sidewalk, and that's a 3-hour adventure to, learn from him, and that kind of a thing, right? And he's got this dour 75-year-old son. So the 104-year-old says he wants to beat the world record for the longest man alive. And he was saying it's this Korean gentleman who lived to be 118, who was very strong and vibrant. Says, but it's crucial that I be around people who are, young and vibrant in their thought and their actions. And so he threatened the son, the 75-year-old, to put the 75-year-old into an old folks home. The 104 is going to put the 75-year-old in an old folks home. What a beautiful movie. It was just so, it was lovely. Yeah.
I want to see it. I'm going to see if I can find it. I thought about it the last time, and then I've been really busy. My boss is so driving. And for those of you who don't know, I work for Allan, so that was an inside joke. But he's a great guy to work for. But I really want to see that. And it brings up, when I was doing the research for this, about the mental health benefit to seniors and storytelling, and having somebody that actually wants to hear what they say, like reduces anxiety, produces more oxytocin, so the drugs they need go down, depression goes down. Physically, they're more animated because, when you speak. I love your story about the older generation the older gentleman, where he heard music and it activated and got him, moving.
Yeah. One other thing related to that, I was at, I think I did a post about this, about the, what's it called now? Brain Fire, is that what it's called? At the story of the neuroscience department development at the U of L. And one of the things they talk about to maintain brain health and avoid Alzheimer's and those kind of things is about remaining connected with people. And what's important, that you can see and you can hear, right? So if you have challenges in that department as you age, solve those, because that's really important to keep your connectivity, because otherwise your world just keeps getting smaller and smaller, right? And so if you're in a conversation, you don't understand what the other person's saying, that's obviously not going to go that well. Scott, we're over time, but do we have a we're 32 minutes.
Yeah, we can wrap it up, man.
Okay.
We had a little sabbatical because Al was away, and those of you who know us, Al and I just love talking about health, hope, and happiness, and but we'll rein it in. I did mention to Al, and we'll talk about it more, about maybe seeing if we can get. Al's got some friends that are incredible storytellers from our Indigenous community here, and maybe we can get them in to talk to us sometime.
That is a great idea. Love it. Yeah.
Share a little bit of a story, and as you know, our sad attempts at sharing do make quite a journey out there once we release them, and it would be nice to send some genuine Blackfoot stories out into the airways.
That is a beautiful idea, and both of us know who we need to contact about that.
Yep. We're very lucky.
Take us home, Brother Scott.
Thank you from my very good friend Allan Friesen, the acapellist, and somebody who tells great stories, and who I look forward to many more years of sharing stories with him and with you. Come back next Thursday and we'll be here.
Gita Matson, keep well.
Thanks, everyone.
Done. Okay.
Cool.
That was good.
Yeah, no, I thought that...